Hello and welcome to episode number 15 of Heart of the Shaman podcast. This is Pavan and I am here with Betty G, my co-host this morning.
Good morning, everybody.
So today we are super excited about the topic. We're going to be talking about connection and journeying with animals. As friends, familiars, soulmates, and guides. So that might be, as I'm saying it, I'm like, to really simplify, it's about that magical connection that we have with animals. And oftentimes I have referenced the four communities in this podcast, that being self, others, other humans, spirit, and then nature, which includes plants and animals. And so we're going to go over the different types of relationships that we have with them, how they touch our lives, how they communicate with us and impart wisdom, and the importance both in the physical world and non-physical reality with these relationships. So lots of juicy information here and a topic that is close to both of our hearts. I have Loki in the background here, and this was my dog, who's really like a soulmate and definitely a familiar. Um, he crossed over this year in January, and I'll get into that a little bit later on in the podcast. But we have a new dog as well, and it's just a beautiful. I feel like I have to do this again because he's smiling in the photo. But yeah, that connection can be really beautiful and it's really unique to, all of the pets that we have. Betty has a very poignant quote to start us out.
Good morning, everybody. I pulled a card from an oracle deck, and it has to do actually, it's an animal oracle deck. It's called Secret Language of Animals. So
Mm.
it's appropriate for this podcast. However, it has the card that I pulled is about water, and the picture is, we can see that if it's a shell. I don't know if you can see it. But um, I feel like without water, every animal, every being needs water. So I felt like it was appropriate. Maybe that's why this came up. But what it is a Chinook, and I need to put my glasses on. I'm sorry. It's a Chinook Indian blessing. And it says, "We call upon the waters that rim the earth, horizon to horizon, that flow in the rivers and streams, that fall upon our gardens and fields, and we ask that they teach us and show us the way." So each animal and each of the living things, even the things that are in the ocean and in bodies of water, are a part of our animal kingdom. And in that dimension, when they were created, they rely on water. So it's a huge part of this overall discussion. And one of the things that I remembered when I was young, cowboys always said, drink where the horse drinks. The horse will
Mm.
not drink bad water. So if
Yes.
you are riding your horse and it goes to a pond and it won't drink, you should not drink that water either. So animals have an innate ability to sense, and they know what is healthy for them, and they know that they need water. So, and they'll dig, and eat roots of cactus or whatever's under there. So that's kind of significant. And I think that water itself is such a huge part of our body and of our lives. And so, we're an animal basically. Another, the supposedly the most intelligent animal. I'm not sure about that, but anyway, that's how I wanted to start with this. I love the spirit animal oracle deck, and I thought it was great that that came up because it is so significant in the health and in caring for yourself to be in bodies of water, to put water in your body, and to be careful of the quality of the water, and to be a part of the stewardship of taking care of these bodies of water. Don't put poison in our rivers, and don't put poison and plastic in the ocean. And I get on this tangent every podcast about not caring and not being good caregivers of this planet. She needs our help. So,
Right.
yeah.
Well,
Just
and it feels like, yeah, being good stewards. And so that, there are animals that can come into our lives where we're caregivers for them. And then also, this extends to all of nature, right? So, yes, how in our local
mhm.
communities and, of course, other areas, if we're traveling, can we really take care of nature, the natural environment? And we've talked before about how it really has all of the answers. I think that, whenever we have questions or we can't figure something out, there's something really magical about just going out into nature. And, oftentimes it's by observing the animals that are out there that the answers will come to us. There's also obviously something about the frequency, right, of the earth and the planet and just, being out there and grounding and soaking that up, and making space for yourself and being in a peaceful environment. So, potentially, even though it's a simple thing, there's kind of a lot going on there. We get ourselves out of the noise of sort of like our modern lifestyle and away from, I don't know, AI or whatever.
No, seriously.
And yeah,
Anything,
and
any electronics.
right out into the natural world. And so, I know over the course of my life, I've observed so many different, just kind of like cool, interesting things in nature. And like you said, with the horses and knowing what water to drink, really just how that instinct, which for us is similar to our intuition, comes through and, just kind of like allows them to navigate things. Um, I think also there's just like so much. So whether it's animals in the wild or in nature or even our pets that they can teach us. And with pets, unconditional love is really the main thing, right? It's like they're so, especially dogs. So I've had dogs over the course of my adult life and through my childhood, and it's like they're so in the present. And so, we'll kind of get into this more. I don't know if Betty was actually speaking about before we started recording. We were talking a little bit about, so the time we're recording this is just after, just kind of like still in that new moon energy towards the end of October. And I think Saturday is we're going into November. So it's been really intense. And there's also something about reflecting on, we're finishing a 9-year cycle. And so we were talking about that, and both of us came to Charleston about 9 years ago. But she was living in a canyon at an animal shelter, taking care of animals. So I feel like, yeah, if you want to speak about that a little bit, it's interesting that that was kind of right at the beginning of that cycle.
Well, for some reason, I mean, I normally just bring from my knowledge and wisdom and, experience. And for some reason, I was shown all these quotes that I had never seen, which I felt were poignant, and they were necessary to. So I don't normally read, but I'm going to read another one. Um,
Yeah.
this is George Washington Carver, which I felt was interesting. It says, reading about nature is fine, but if a person walks into the woods and listens carefully, he can hear more than what is in books, for they speak with the voice of God.
Mm,
Just love that.
yeah.
Touches me. Because if we were to emulate and remember and watch our animals, they teach us how to live in the moment. They teach us how to bring every drop of life to ourselves. We don't worry about insignificant things. If you listen to your dog, or you watch your dog, they know when to react, they know when to rest, they know everything instinctively. And I think just a walk through the woods, and I remembered as I was doing this and reading these things, um, that all of the poets and all of the authors and all of the great writers that we respect so much and that stay, uppermost in our lives are, they went into nature. Thoreau and people that wrote really beautiful things that are so famous still, and so memorable. Those people connected with nature. They would go into a cabin in a retreat and stay sometimes for a year to write for inspiration, So we can learn so much from the animal kingdom, and I just feel, I mean, I get emotional even thinking about it because when I was living in that canyon, there were so many different types of animals around, and I felt every one of them. I could feel their
Yeah.
presence. I would know that they were there, and they knew that I knew that they were there. But yeah, it was a beautiful experience. But I feel like the connection that we have, unconditional love, is the pure Christ consciousness. And when we talk about attaining that, that's what it's about. Is
Hmm.
the pure unconditional love that we can have for each other, you know? Nobody has to have terms or conditions on just loving one another. This your fellow man, you're a part of that, bringing that forward. So I hope everybody is good to their animals. If you aren't, you should be.
I think the communication and how we communicate with them teaches us a lot also.
Mhm.
So, obviously everyone can be in a different place with this, but using dogs as our pets, for example, and certainly this applies to cats and other pets that you may have as well. But I know at this stage and for a decent amount of time going back into the past, I've communicated telepathically with my dogs, but they also pick up like every single cue. So, we might have a command, we're talking, we're speaking something, maybe we have like a hand motion or something that goes along with it. And yeah, they're picking up those cues, but they also really pick up a lot of the subtle cues of like your body language and even what you have going on internally. So even if your body language is intentionally relaxed, but then you're feeling pretty anxious or something on the inside, they know. They definitely, can key into that vibration and pick it up. So I think it can be useful kind of to have the awareness that they're tuned into all of that. We have that capacity as well, but we kind of orient ourselves in a way to tune a lot of it out. And we could sort of have to go back to basics to pay attention to all of these different cues. So it helps us communicate with them. Like if I can recognize that my dog is picking up on more than I'm typically picking up on when I, like in the environment or
Who's the
interacting
pack
with
leader?
others. Yeah, it's useful. And yeah, you want to, it kind of pushes you to be in more of a state of awareness and just sort of more direct, I would say, with your communication. So, so I was talking before about so Loki, the dog behind me, I actually got him in 2010 when I was 28, and he transitioned I'm 42 now, and he transitioned this year in January. And I got him from a rescue in downtown Chicago, and there's also something to be said for pets coming into your lives at just kind of like these key times and them choosing you. And, so it wasn't a whole plan of I'm gonna get a dog. I walk by this shelter like every day to work, and it was always like I can't go in there because, I'm gonna feel bad for all the animals, and of course I'm gonna walk out with an animal. And then one day it was like, okay, time for you to go in.
Hmm.
I walked in and, this was a city shelter that was overcrowded and all the dogs were in cages and I saw Loki and It was actually like we had a telepathic communication right away because if you were just looking at the scene, he was totally scared. He was barking. He was freaked out. It didn't seem like he was even paying attention to me or aware of my presence or whatever. But when I got to his cage, and also it didn't seem like he was, I mean, you would think like, oh my God, this dog is probably not trained at all or, anything like that. But when I got to the cage, I just felt like he was like, okay, you're gonna get me out of here and like we're gonna just be
She's
together.
here. She's
So
here.
yeah, I brought him home and he was a little over a year old and he definitely was a rescue with some issues. I mean, he wasn't comfortable with people or other animals or it took me a whole summer of I read like Caesar Milan, his Be a Pack Leader book and I certainly connected with other people who know how to work with dogs, etc. And yeah, it was a whole like couple of months of just like pretty intensive training, which I could say was for him, right? But like also for me, because one of the main things is like you have to have a lot of patience and, be in the present for sure. But also there's something about I kind of want to say discipline or, it's not like you can be like, okay, today we're going to learn how to walk on the leash. And then the next day you just feel like, oh gosh, I don't want to have to start and stop and start and stop. Let's just walk. And if the dog's, just kind of pulling, I'll deal with that another day. It's like every single thing there's this kind of consistency. And again, it goes beyond just your um, communication of what you're speaking or where your hand is, right? It's like you want to be consistent in your energy so that the dog can feel secure and feel calm and sort of like understand. And so, many of you listening have probably had experience with this and you know what I'm talking about, but yeah, when you kind of feel into those deeper layers, it's like, okay, yeah, this is a whole relationship that is teaching not just the dog, but like you quite a bit. And so anyway, Loki and I went on quite a journey for, a couple of, well, I guess 16 years. And and I also wanted to say that like he felt like a soulmate. And so I've had other dogs and the relationships are different. So I think that that is something that you could have a soulmate who's a person or a pet or I even honestly have had a guide in non-ordinary reality who is a soulmate who I had a relationship in another lifetime with. So I'm kind of like going in a lot of directions maybe with that comment, but it's just to say that like these relationships really have a uniqueness and they all can be really different. So Betty, if you want to speak about.
Well, I was wondering if you want me to jump in with what I told you after he crossed over.
Yes, yeah.
Because I am a psychic and a medium, and I've been communicating with animals and helping animals with visualization. You like if they need guidance, I want my cats to come in at night. I had a window opening with a like a cat window so they could come through. So I knew
Yeah.
we were out mousing somewhere, and I wanted them in for the night, and I would visualize them jumping through that window. I would think of their name, or I would think of their how they look, and then I would see them coming down the sidewalk and jumping through the window. And inevitably, within 5 minutes, both of those cats were in the house. And
Yeah.
so, communicating with your animals telepathically is amazing. And when you want to reach them, if they're lost, that's how I do it. I kind of remote view and I get in touch with the animal and see where they are and if they're still with us and that type of thing. But what was interesting was when you said about Chicago, I didn't connect when we talked about it before, but he is from Chicago,
Hmm.
got him in Chicago. So I was standing at my brother's kitchen sink doing some dishes, and all of a sudden I see him, and there's this cityscape, and I don't even know the cityscape of Chicago, but I thought that's Chicago. That must be Chicago. And that there was a, a chain link fence and an empty lot, kind of just dirt and not developed in any way. And this high rise, like it looked like an apartment building. And I was seeing basically what he was seeing. And then he was in front of me, and I looked to my right, and there was a brown and black dog, another dog. And it was like he was waiting for you. And there was also like a green the trees and kind of like a park setting. I don't know if it was just natural or if that was actually a park, but that was where he was looking. And so when I spoke to you about it, you told me that you used to walk with another dog, and that
Hmm.
was in Chicago. And that was kind of what you described. You recognized what I was seeing.
Yes.
So he was waiting for you to come and walk him in that same way with the other dog and their owner, whatever, who you later told me was his friend Taffy, right?
Hmm.
So when I see them on the other side, it's always been kind of a mystery to me, but um, I know that you were there also. So it opened up a new, um, I guess, window for me to see that we're multidimensional. So our animals go to that dimension, and an aspect of us is also there
Hmm.
with them. So, in a way, we really never are apart. They leave us in the physical 3D in this dimension, they leave us physically, but an aspect of you and his life, he went back to Chicago. He's still
Hmm.
there. It's interesting that that connected because this was so clear, and he was vibrant. I mean, he was, ready to go. And I remember telling you he was like 3 years old.
Hmm.
And that's where you said you lived still at 3 years, right?
Yes.
But this cannot be like accidental. I didn't know any of that. And when I see that, that makes me feel good because it makes me realize that part of me is with my animals on the other side as well, the ones that I've
Mhm.
lost.
Yeah, I mean, this was huge because, I was mentioning training Loki and, he did get to the point. He was never like super comfortable with people and other dogs, but he got to the point where he could be around any dogs, any people, and also really just followed my lead. So if I said the person or the dog or whatever was okay, then, he was going to be okay with it. And I think I lived in 13 different places over the course of his life. So
Mhm.
he had to learn to be like adaptable, I mean, we were
Right.
in Chicago, we were in New York, we were in Charleston, different apartment buildings. We lived with different homes, we lived with different people, other pets, so there was like a lot of adjusting.
But you
That was,
mentioned that he was really happy at 3 years old, and that's where you were.
yes.
That was
I
probably one
mean,
of his favorite places.
yeah, and what I was gonna say ultimately I think is like when he transitioned I felt complete about it. Like we had already had a telepathic communication where he was not gonna want to like try to hang around after any, physical ailments that were holding him back and that sort of thing. And I mean, he lived a long life for a dog and all of this, but I found myself, of course, grieving. It was just like, he came and went everywhere with me and was good company, a good protector, so many different things. But also, the main thing was like, where is he? And is he okay? And was there anyone there to like, like, I don't want him to be alone. And this was really like the one, I would say, like, upsetting factor. And I was like, God, I need to know. And so then, when you were able to tune in, I just like, of course, right, there's things about the other side and how all of that works that we don't fully understand. But yeah, it was just so clear. Like there's this huge empty lot that was one building over from where I lived. in Chicago. And when I first got him, that's where we did a lot of the training because there was a hole in the fence, and I would just like go through the hole in the fence with him and then put something against it. And then we had that whole space to like practice things. And Taffy was a Doberman that was a neighbor. Her name was Elena. And I lived in the Ukrainian village. And so she was a neighbor with her dog, and they just really got along as friends at that time in his life. So, needless to say, like all the details really were there. And so that brought me so much comfort. So I definitely recommend to anyone listening if you have a similar situation, or like Betty mentioned, she like if your pets run away or anything like that happens, she can really be hugely helpful. Um, but yeah, this was huge to know. And then I'll also say in terms of the telepathic communication, so I did that with Loki from an early time because we did have that first initial communication at the shelter. But he was also had kind of like a stubborn personality. And, I would be communicating something, and then what he would communicate back with to me would be just like a plate with a bunch of treats on it. Or like, like it wouldn't necessarily be like complying with what I communicated or answering it, or, like it would just be his own agenda, which was usually like, or it would just be like him showing me the park that he liked to walk to, which was like 3 miles away or more, or whatever. So it was like we could only go once in a while, depending on how much time I had. Um, but it was just kind of funny because he really had his own things, and that's what mattered, and that was it. Like, oh yeah, I'm not concerned about that, but how about give me a plate of treats, or
Mhm.
um so what I wanted to say too, talking about that piece of crossing over and, these aspects of ourselves and other dimensions. And again, not that I can exactly explain how all of that works, but in shamanism and with journeying, um, a lot of times we're journeying with our guides. And this isn't something, I don't know that we've talked about this extensively here, but I just wanted to touch on animals as guides and in non-ordinary reality. So especially if you're someone who like can't have pets or doesn't have pets, and most of us, we can connect with animals out in the wild and in nature to some extent. But there's also that opportunity to connect with them in non-ordinary reality, in your meditations, in your journey meditations. Um, and I have certain guides that work with me in the sessions that I do for myself and for others, and they've been around for a pretty long time, for a couple of decades at least now. And two of my main guides are animal guides. One's a wolf and one's a hawk. And oftentimes, when I go into these journeys, we're always starting out in a beautiful place in nature. And there's often other guides. So, actually, there's a crab, that's one now, two, and an owl. So they usually come out for different types of healings or journeys. So those two, the wolf and the hawk, have been around for a long time, and the others kind of dip in and out depending on what the task is or the intention, maybe. But those relationships can be just as rich as the ones that are in this 3D reality. And there's so much again that you can learn, but also there's like a friendship there, with the hawk and the wolf. One of them is really kind of like helping to govern my spiritual life. And then the other is more of like a protector. But they are always there and oftentimes are coming along in these journeys. And so there's just something about like the trust that's there, and what can be communicated in the back and forth. And sometimes I will just go into these spaces and just like hang out with them. It doesn't always have to be for a particular instance. So Betty, I feel like you have some good things to share along those lines as well.
Well, your power animals, they change over your lifetime, and you can have one for a long period of time, whatever you're going through. And then, um, especially the natives were in touch with this, the indigenous, because um,
Yes.
they respected animals so much more than we do. If they use an animal for something, they regard that as a blessing, and they have so much respect. Like I mentioned when we were off camera, if they kill a deer, they don't celebrate. They
Hmm.
reverently walk over and put water in the deer's mouth for the journey, for their spirit. So they're going to use their body, but they don't take it lightly. They don't enjoy killing something to use it, and
Right.
so that has a big impact, like on the food and what we eat and everything. When we take in something in our body that gave its life, we need to thank that animal. We need to thank their spirit for letting us enjoy the body. And it's kind of interesting. I have another quote. I I have a lot of respect for Albert Einstein, and I had never read this. I've read most of his quotes, but this one says, "A man's moral worth is not measured by what his religious beliefs are, but rather by what emotional impulses he has received from nature during his lifetime." That does
Hmm.
not seem like something Einstein would say, but
Right.
I found that very eye-opening. And another thing that when you were talking about, how I see the animals after they cross over, um, the the fact that they um, when they come to me, they show other animals to me that are there with them. And usually the animal that they show me is one that was specifically close to them. It could be a
Hmm.
litter mate, it could be a pet in the house that is there when they come or whatever. And they always show me um, running in a field, like my brother's lab, Bella, when she crossed over, they had another dog, another black lab, bigger, named Max, and she was with him. And as she grew, and when I
Hmm.
saw her, he was in front of her, and they were going through waist high white flowers, just a field of like coming up out of them and jumping down into them. And she showed me that she was with Max. And it's
Yeah.
comforting to me to know that they find each other on the
Right.
other side. And I mean, that's happened. The little Chihuahua that I took care of, he was 16 when he crossed over. And he was like a baby. And my friend just was devastated when she lost Benji. And I said, well, he'll show me, he'll come to me. Because I watched him too, and I adored him. And he really thought a lot of me. So I wake up one morning and I see him by a lake, and it's a small body, like a pond, I guess you'd say. And he's with this little long, like a dachshund with a curly tail in the back with long red hair. It was a long haired dachshund, and they were playing with the water with their paws, like jumping at the little water that lapped up on it and running along the shore together. I didn't know who this dog was. I had no idea. So I told her, I said, I saw Benji, and he was at this pond, and he was with this. She goes, "Oh my God, that's my sister's dog, Joey." She goes, "He's with Joey? They grew up together." And Joey's on the other side too already, and to know that that takes place, for me to
Hmm.
see that that is happening. And I mean, maybe they're with all the pets that they've known or all the other animals that they're litter mates and their parents. Sometimes it's with parents. And to me, that's just a beautiful, makes me feel confident, that there are other places where they're still what we would call alive.
Right.
They never die.
Yeah.
The image is obviously of their body so that I recognize them, but it has more to do with their spirit.
Hmm.
And sometimes your dog or your cat will come back to you in another pet. That's also very typical. It happens
Right.
all the time, where the person will lose their only cat or whatever they've had for 20 years. And so then they get another cat. Maybe they grieve for a while, and then they get another cat. And the cat displays habits or mannerisms or whatever, and things that that other pet did. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes people will say, is this my dog? Is this my cat? Is this, the one
Right.
that he's come back to me? And that happens more often than you know. They still want to be in your life, and obviously they don't live as long as we do.
Mm-hmm.
But there's kind of a cute thing that I heard that a little boy had lost a family dog, and his dad was telling him, that he was sorry that animals just don't live as long as people. And the little boy said, I know why that is, Dad. He said, um, dogs already know how to love. People have to take longer to learn how to love.
Yeah.
That's a great way to look at it, especially from a child's perspective, as usually they have a hard time with grief. But,
Mm-hmm.
to know that, people take longer to get it. And sometimes our pets teach us that.
I think another thing that you have said, which is kind of like a possibility and pretty interesting too, is sometimes your pet who has crossed over chooses another pet for you or sort of like,
Right. This
guide
one will
that
work. Yeah,
experience.
yeah, yeah, it's true.
And so two things. One is I have had multiple connections with a past life where in that lifetime I traveled with a pack of dogs. And so Loki was one of those dogs in the pack, and I've had another dog that was one of those dogs in the pack as well. So that was something that was interesting, that it was like, okay, came back, but in another life. And then in addition to that, so this year, just actually a few weeks ago on Matt and I's anniversary, I got another dog, Skeeter. And but Matt had been saying to me since really the beginning of the year, like, well, what do you think about getting another dog? And really what I had said is I don't want to, maybe in like a few years or something, but so I wasn't, at least in my mind, planning on doing this. And then I won't make it a long story, but I saw a post on somebody's page about Skeeter, and it was just kind of like, hey, he's a great dog. We've been trying to adopt him, and
They
you know,
were begging,
like they were begging. It was just a long kind of begging
get
post.
this dog.
And I'm like, oh, he seems like he would be great. And so I had this internal kind of like, oh, like knowing like I could, like I could actually provide a home for this dog. But I didn't say anything to anyone, and I just let it be in my own kind of like mind and experience for maybe like 4 days or something. And then I checked the post again, and they're still like begging, begging. All these people are commenting, like, I hope he finds a home, but he still needed one. And so I filled out an application. And then right then, the woman had said, okay, well, we had like a family do a trial run. And I think that a couple of people had done this and brought him back. And, she's like, so it ends on Wednesday. So that was October 8th. And, we'll know for sure. And I didn't forget about it, but I just kind of assumed based on what she said, like, okay, like, well, the main thing is you found a home, and maybe this just opened me up to other possibilities. And, that's good. And that was kind of like, I'm thinking the end of it, like, oh, it's a family with kids. That's good for a dog. And then yeah, it's my anniversary. It's the morning of October like 8th, and the woman sends me a message, and she's just like, okay, well, they brought him back, and they loved him and they were sad about it, but it was just like too much energy. And like, I don't know, maybe if they had not had a puppy before, or something, which, and I can understand that, just it's like, okay, you've got kids, you've got other things going on. And like I was talking about with Loki in those first couple of months in the summer, I mean, there was a lot of like training and energy that went into, making it so that he could be kind of like comfortable with me and in my lifestyle. We're going to be interacting with people and other dogs and all of this. And so, Skeeter actually had some training because the rescue has high school kids teach them like their commands and take them on walks. And so he was really well adjusted, but he does have puppy energy. So needless to say, I brought him home on my anniversary. And so now well, it's the 28th, so that was the 8th. So,
Almost
we're Yeah, a little ways out from that. He's very well adjusted. I have another dog, Gibbs, who's just about 5. My husband got him after a dog of his German Shepherd died a few years ago. And so he's very high energy. And so they make like a perfect pair. They can just kind of like battle each other multiple times a day and run around in the
What's
yard.
Matt's other dog's name?
Um, Grant was the German Shepherd
Grant, right?
crossed
Yeah.
over. Yeah. And then Gibbs, he got, kind of like shortly after that. So, but, so I did end up kind of going into the details because I guess I couldn't resist. But suffice it to say that, like, so this little guy is a different energy, and I don't get the sense of it's like Loki, but I did have the distinct sense of Loki kind of pushed that envelope and put the
He
energy.
facilitated the
He
adoption.
facilitated it. Yeah, because in my head I was like, okay, I'm not doing this. And then sure enough, it's just kind of like the timing and I don't know, in the energy of things that are just for your own good beyond what you have an awareness of. It really came through. And so Loki delivered Skeeter to me. And so that's been working out really well. So for all of you, what I would say also in connection to this is telepathic communication with your pets can be really impactful if it's not something that you already do. I think a lot of you probably do that to some extent. Typically, I will just kind of have an image from my heart space and kind of like send it into their heart space. And like Betty was saying with the open window and the cats coming in, there's a lot of things where it's like you're suggesting, hey, this is do this, or this is the ideal situation, or but I've found that projecting whatever it is as a picture, which kind of sounds similar to what you were saying with visualizing the window, works the best. Like they just can see the picture and they understand. um, and then it's something that, it can take a little bit. So I would say try it out and then play around with that. And it will definitely expand over time. Like you'll definitely develop your relationship with your animal or your pet in a deeper way. And the last thing I'll say about that before turning it over to you is same thing with animals out in the wild or in nature. It's like anytime I pass an animal that like somebody hit in the road, I'm always like, I mean, obviously, typically already have transition, but I'm sending Reiki and I'm thankful, like you were mentioning with the Native American, like mentality and way of looking at things. It's like just grateful for that life. Like that life is as sacred as any other life. Kind of like, just taking a moment to really connect with that. But then I'm also, if I'm out in my backyard, I'm connecting with like the birds out there and the squirrels and literally everything, the trees. And my trees have names. I've probably shared that before. And, some of the animals, certainly can come back around different seasons, like the hummingbirds. That's a good example. It'll be the same ones. They leave for a few months and then they come back. And so you really can develop that same type of relationship there, which is pretty cool.
A couple of things I do when I go past an animal that's deceased or I see one, in the wild, um, I do the symbol of the scissors like this in front of my lifeline, in front of my belly button, and
Hmm.
I thank them for their life and what they brought to this reality. And I cut the cord, I symbolically cut the cord and then take their spirit and go, like in my hand and free them from that body.
Hmm.
Sometimes it was like hit by a car, there's a shock,
Yeah.
to the body. And I want to make sure that their soul knows where to go or that it can be lifted and the angels can take that soul, that spirit.
Yeah.
Um, Another thing, the eye contact with animals, like you do not necessarily want to make eye contact with a Rottweiler. If you're in a room with one, you don't want to pin them and look at them because they take that as a challenge. That's how in the wild another animal will challenge them. And my brother got a puppy 3 years ago, I don't even, he had two old dogs and both of them transitioned. And he got the puppy before the female dog transition. And so when he barks, he's, guarding, he's a schnauzer, he's high energy. So he would run to the door barking. And I decided I was going to train him a little bit because I was living with my brother. So when Louis, his name is, he would run to the door, I would get up and go to the door and look out and say, "Thank you, thank you." And he would turn around and go halfway back to the kitchen from the door, turn around. I would turn around and not make eye contact with him. And as soon as I turned around, he would go into the kitchen. If I would have made eye contact with him, he would run back over to the door with me. So he
Mm-hmm.
was letting me be the pack leader. If I got up
Right.
and checked it out, his job was done. He alerted me. If I needed him in the wild, that's how, like, sled dogs or whatever, as soon as they know that someone's faltering or whatever, they look back to the next dog and make eye contact, and that dog knows that it's supposed to help the pack leader.
Mm-hmm.
That's that you can do that with your animals. If you're the pack leader, you establish that you're the pack leader. He does it every time. I still, when I see him, I will go to the door. Thank you. Thank you. I look out and then he turns around. He knows that I'm handling it and he stops and turns and waits for me to make eye contact. If I don't make eye contact, his job is done. And that was the most intriguing thing to watch unfold, you know, just how simple that is. And people, yell and scream and stop barking. And, they're, if you don't get up and do it, what's the reason to have a dog to alert you? Like if you want somebody to know when someone's at the door or out in the yard or something, you want them to bark. So then when you tell them not to, how can they establish when it's right and wrong?
Right.
It all has to do when you watch a person with a dog on the corner sitting at the light to cross the street, you see the dog looking up at the person, waiting for the eyes. They're waiting to see if they're
Mm-hmm.
looking at them, it's time to cross. That they watch the signals from the person communicating with their eyes.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the way that that works. And it's
Yeah.
interesting because when I work with lost animals, I see what they see. Now,
Mm-hmm.
if you see a dog crossing a street over a riverbed and there's signs up above, they can't read those signs.
Right.
I see Highway 50, Highway 61, whatever it is, I see what they see.
Mm-hmm.
So I can tell where the location is. It's a street that crosses the riverbed and there's a sign over it that says highway whatever. If people are looking for their animals, it's vital that they know where, it doesn't matter if there's trees or lakes or whatever. I can see stores, I can see vehicles, I can see businesses that animal is seeing as they go along, and other people, or other people trying to help them. If someone interacts with them, I can describe that person. So
Right.
that's more like remote viewing.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't explain how it works, but it's been a wonderful experience for me to help people, find their animals. And one old dog that my Native American friend Gail had, her niece's dog, he was really, really old. And he got out, the cable guy left the gate open and he got out. And she called me right away, and whatever his name was is gone. And my niece is freaking out because it's really hot down here and he needs water and everything. And I said, so right away, I see him behind a gate. Somebody has taken him in the yard and he's behind the gate. And I said, well, I think he's okay because, he's getting water and, this someone has put him inside a gate. I saw the gate close.
Yeah.
But then I said, he's within a block and a half or 2 blocks maximum from her house. So she was working, I think, or busy and couldn't do flyers. But I said, put up a flyer with a picture of him on all of the corners in your neighborhood around there, or walk around and you'll. So the next morning she went with a handful of flyers, and she's on one side of a telephone pole hammering a nail into the pole with this flyer, and there's another lady on the other side, and she's got flyers and she's hammering that up. It was the same dog, the one that was lost and the one that was found, and they were
Right.
next to each other. And she looked and she goes, "Oh, did you lose your dog?" And she goes, "No, I found one and it's him." So, I mean, how beautiful is that? And it was about a block and a half from her actual house. And the
Right.
other lady took him in and said, "Oh, it's too hot. You got to have water, buddy." And she said she just was sheltering him overnight and let him stay with her. And they both
Hmm.
were putting up a flyer, lost and found. That was one of my most profound experiences, because I thought, now that was creator intervening there for sure to save that little guy. Because
Hmm.
you if they get too hot and it's 105 or whatever, they're probably going to perish if they don't have somebody take care of them. But yeah, so, and the we were going to touch on working relationships with dogs, or different types of relationship. And it was interesting when I started making notes and just working dogs, like the police dogs, the search and rescue dogs, the cadaver dogs, the dogs that find drugs, the drugs, especially airports, and dogs that work in that capacity, and different
Hmm.
breeds that are specifically better at that, or train better for, like, in earthquakes, to find people that are trapped and things like that. That to me has always just been amazing and touches my heart. But also herding dogs, that work with the sheep and with livestock, and cattle dogs. And one of the best dogs I ever had was part Australian cattle dog, and they're so protective. And those dogs will protect their flock. They'll guard, and they'll sleep between the door, and when they're in their shelter, they sleep by the door so they can protect them from predators. And those are working relationships where um, they guard the flocks, whatever. Bomb sniffing dogs, all of
Hmm.
just in helping humans with what they do. I was surprised, just how many different. And then emotional support animals, service animals, animals that can help a person when they're having a seizure, or a diabetic, coma, that when they're going to go into one, they can get their medicine. They train dogs for these things. And I mean, I hate to say it, but lab animals, animals that help us when they test drugs and things. I don't believe in that. I don't like that. But that has saved probably thousands of lives, that they use something on an animal. Even the first animal that went into space, you know, not a
Hmm.
human, but when they put
Right.
a monkey or a dog into outer space, that what they have done for the world. It connected me to our podcast about ancestors,
Mm.
about ancestral things they did, that they left for us, and they went through all the trauma and strife to bring those things forward. And like, animals have done the same thing. They've helped
Right.
us so much in our advancement, and they've given their life. They've obviously, they give their life for food or whatever. But um, even back in the war days, carrier pigeons, they had no way, they didn't have electronics or the kind of communication we do. And they sent vital messages with carrier pigeons, imagine.
Hmm.
And when you think about shamanically, the beautiful, wonderful, amazing thing, when you journey, the animals that are with you, or the animals that you run into on a journey, I'm sure that that's probably the most spiritual form, that I could connect with. But back when shamanism started, like when it was the first form of healing, the animals were really involved.
Right.
Birds, and then people ask me, birds are messengers. They bring their, because they fly, spirit
Hmm.
chooses birds because they're free out of a body and they can take upon the body of a bird and come to your window every day, like cardinals especially are messengers, and eagles and hawks. I my friend lost her son and we went out to a ranch and we're visiting a relative, and when we left I heard this owl. And I said, "Oh," and she goes, "Oh, that's, that she's Native American and that's a symbol, right?" And as we're driving this long road from the ranch in the dark, there's this white owl flying right along beside the car looking at me.
Hmm.
I know
Yeah.
that that was her son. I just
Hmm.
know, I knew. And I told her, "That's Joey, that's your son." And so, when, I mean, it's endless when you think of how they help us, and um, even just to let you know something you already know,
Right.
remind you, it's a beautiful thing. I don't know what I would do. My life without animals would not be the same. I don't know how to describe how much they mean to me.
Yeah, I feel the same, and it reminds me of like, animals as familiars. Like, of course, witches always had their cats, and a lot of times a bunch of other animals with them too, cats, dogs,
Mhm.
toads, lizards, pigs, like just, anything really. But eh, I think from maybe like a shamanic perspective, when there's that deeper connection with nature and some of these themes of not just wisdom, but like really connection, then surrounding yourself with animals and or having them as pets, it really like attunes you to that and enriches your life in like a powerful way. So it might not be for everyone to have like a bunch of pets, right? Or again, maybe you can't, or but yeah, for me, I just feel like I can't live a life without them sort of journeying with me through this life because it keeps me really grounded. Um, and it just kind of keeps you honest and it keeps you connected to what is really important. When you were mentioning like a Rottweiler earlier and not making the eye contact, and then, like, of course, if your dog is barking and kind of like, okay, you want them to bark if there's an intruder or something, but not to be just like barking all the time. Two things came to mind. One is how it's important to them to have like jobs, dogs at least. So yeah, it might be that they're protecting something, or that can look a lot of different ways. But also, if you get frustrated, like if they're just like barking or doing whatever they're not supposed to, and you get angry and loud, definitely they know if you're angry, which can be scary, or, but the loud too, sometimes they think you're just like barking back at them. Um,
Yeah.
so again, it's important to kind of be able to almost like shape shift and have the perspective that they would have in the moment and the situation. And of course, that sort of example is like, yeah, no, you can redirect them. You can, but like if you're calm and you don't make eye contact, whatever the situation, it's like that's kind of an example, I think, of like the pack leader and of diffusing things and
Like a
building.
sled dog. I mean, the
Yeah,
communication between them, but I think that saying thank you, um, that
yeah,
was, and then again, right
yeah.
there, that is one of the times when you can use your telepathic ability and you can visualize them walking away from the door, being quiet. You visualize what you want them to do. They think in pictures. Animals think in like a snapshot, like a picture in their mind, and they go on energy. So if you
Mm.
can learn how to pull your energy into a place that's calm, and then a picture of them walking away and visualize them quieting down, it's phenomenal how it works. I mean, it's unreal how you can just tell them their dinner's ready. And like if they're outside or whatever, you can tell them that
Hmm.
dinner's in the kitchen, you can see the plate and show, visualize that, and they will be coming in.
Yes.
You don't have to call their name or call them or whatever. And I think that honestly, when we make connection with our ancestors or the ETs or whatever, whoever's going to show up and help us or show us how to do things in a better way, we're going to realize that. We're going to realize that most of these things are energetically transmitted and they're telepathic or whatever. And we will eventually come to be a society where words are not predominant. It'll be mostly thinking.
And I think part of
Or
that too is as we move in that direction, we are managing, but also like filtering our emotions in a
Mhm.
way that is smoother and more true. So, yeah, going back to like if you have a calm energy, obviously your pet is going to be calmer, but it helps you to just cultivate a calmer state in general all the time, not just when, something crops up where you want to diffuse the situation. And I mean, we're just in a time where who couldn't use that, like who couldn't use that sort of like tool or benefit of cultivating more presence and more calm in your everyday. Like hopefully we're all sort of working towards more of that. But yeah, that's going to make it easier to communicate telepathically. And it's also going to just help us to be more present when we feel like there is a lot that is chaotic or something. It's like
Well, how you talk to them, your energy and your voice and how you, um, I mean, people can tell your inflection, the volume, the way the energy in your voice. People can pick it up, like,
right.
but when you talk to your animals, I had a friend who had a sick animal and she would, oh, you look so bad today. And, I'm sorry. And I said, don't talk to him like that. Well, you were making him feel terrible. He heard
Yeah,
that in her voice and that he didn't know what she was saying, but he knew that that was not good. And I
right.
said, when he comes out, go, oh my gosh, you look so handsome. Look how healthy you look today. If you talk to them like that, they respond and they feel better. I guess it's
Hmm.
kind of like when you're sick and you're in bed and you have a runny nose and your eyes are all dark and if somebody comes in and say, oh my god, you look terrible, you're going to feel worse.
Right.
If they say, hey, you're looking good today in the hospital, when they come to you looking good today. And I mean, one thing that I love, my daughter she sent me a thing on the internet a long time ago that was, who in the world would you rather see when you come home from work than your dog or your cat at the door? They have been waiting for you all day to come
Yeah.
through the door. And there's nothing better. That makes their day. They go crazy. They're shaking and jumping and pawing and barking or whatever because to them, there's no time. They don't think about looking at the clock. But when that is when you need to greet them in the same way because they wait all day to show you how happy they are to see you. They
Yes.
don't just lay in the
Yeah.
corner when you come in. If
Hmm.
only people were able to emulate this type of behavior, this type, learn these things and how to talk to each other, how to express how they feel energetically, thinking about people when they're traveling. I hope you're having a great time. I hope you're safe, and send that energy to people that are far away from us. I think that before words, there was probably a lot less miscommunication and misunderstanding between humans. We didn't originally have words. It was
Right.
telepathic. Yeah.
Right. Well,
So
I think at least on my end, in conclusion, I feel like animals as a part of nature enrich our spiritual life in huge ways, but also our life here as humans on Earth in a body. Um, again, for me, I know like my pets, but also just like being out in nature and connecting with animals in the wild, it just consistently keeps me grounded. And there's just a lot to learn. So I'm really thankful. And Betty, whatever closing comments you have or the closing prayer when you're ready.
Yeah, I think that when Creator looks at us, it's not how much money we have or what we do and what we brag about having knowledge of, or what we um, earn, houses and cars and all of the materialism and things. If you're kind and you help animals, if you are just kind and loving to animals, Creator smiles on us.
Mm,
I will
yeah.
say,
Yeah, thank you for that.
yeah. May we meet again, sit in circle, tending our hearts, cultivating our shared love and joy, supporting and is the ascension of our beautiful planet. Until then, our light tears.
Thank you all for joining us. As always, if you have questions, feel free to reach out and we'll be connecting again next month. Enjoy the rest of this month.
Love your animals.
Love your animals.